Hi guys, the fabled Panasonic GH6 is set to be released in the fall of 2021. Is it going to be enough for me to want to replace my beloved GH5? Will it keep me from going to the Sony juggernaut full-frame A7S III? Let's talk about it. Okay, the first thing I got to get out of the way is I am pretty surprised that a GH6 is actually coming. The thing is, I thought the Micro Four Thirds system was going the way of the old dodo bird, you know, because everybody and their grandma is moving to full frame, including Panasonic. Panasonic and their nana, they made the S1 series, and that's a pretty good series of cameras, I tell you what. And Olympus being bought or sold or dismantled, nobody knows what's going on with Olympus. So I was thinking to myself, I guess the Micro Four Thirds is done. But here's the thing, now the GH6 is coming out, Olympus doesn't necessarily seem dead, and even Sharp is coming out with an 8K Micro Four Thirds camera. So things are getting pretty interesting. Now let me give you some of the rumored specs that are out there about the GH6 and what specs would actually make me want to buy this camera. Okay, so they're saying it's going to have a 46 megapixel sensor. It's going to have 1080 up to 240 frames per second. That might be pretty fun, you know, so when you do your hair twirls, it'll look, you know, super majestic. It's going to have 4K 120p. That is a must at this point, thanks to the A7S III. It's going to have less noise in the shadows, and it's going to have 8K up to 30p. Now these are just rumors, but the rumors from the Micro Four Thirds rumor site have actually been pretty accurate, so maybe these will be true. But the truth is, listen, I am only interested in two particular things about this camera, and if you hear me out, I think you might agree with me, because I've been mulling this over for weeks now, thinking about it. You know, just sometimes I talk it out loud. You know, my wife, she doesn't like it. She wants to have conversations about other things, like our kids and their school. And you know what? Panasonic might release a new camera, and I might want to spend your hard-earned money on it. You should listen up. But I really have been thinking about it a lot because I do like the GH lineup. I have a Sony a7 III. That's what I'm filming on right now while I hold my little GH5. And the thing is, I love using the GH5 for video, and it's my favorite. People say you should be camera agnostic, and you know what? Most people are camera agnostic. They just use the camera that suits their needs, that gives them the performance that they'd like. And the A7 III has been very difficult in many ways to get good video out of, and the GH6, I'm already skipped to the GH6, the GH5, this thing has been a real joy to use. Now, the big problem with this, of course, is the autofocus. So let's just talk about the elephant in the room, the autofocus. If Panasonic managed to somehow fix the autofocus, they won't do it. I know they won't. But if they somehow gave me usable, I don't care what you call it contrast-based, DFD, depth from defocus, or whatever nonsense, your time of flight, I don't care. I don't care what you call it. If you give me reliable autofocus, you basically don't even have to do anything. Just give me the GH5 with reliable autofocus, and I will likely buy it because these cameras are the most fun to use. But if they don't give us reliable autofocus, which they won't because they haven't done it for their fancy full frame line, if they're not going to put it in the $4,000 S1H, why are they going to put it in the little GH6? They're not going to do it. So if they're not going to put in the good autofocus, what could possibly tempt people to come on over? And I'll tell you what it is. It's 8K. Now, don't turn off the video. You may say, nobody needs 8K. That's ridiculous. That's being short-sighted. Just hear me out on this. The 8K serves a very good purpose. Now, here's the thing about the human eye. Apparently, these studies have come out where they're saying we can discern differences in detail up to about an 8K screen. After that, it gets a little muddy. We may not be able to see any more detail past 8K. So it looks like our technology may kind of cap out for screens at 8K. So when all the TVs, and some TVs are already being released as 8K, so when that becomes the norm, and it will, because the Canon R something, Canon R5 has the 8K, the Sony A1 sauce, that's got the 8K. It is coming, and if it's available, people are going to want to use it. And things, you could use it right now, because you can use an 8K and then put it down to a 4K timeline and you'll get sharper footage. You can also take an 8K and start zooming and panning around the screen and put it on a 4K timeline. So it's like you'll have your own dolly and your own zoomer. I don't know what job that is on the set, the zoomer. So it serves a purpose right now. And when 8K becomes the standard, you have 8K in your little GH6. So to me, that's a really good selling point. And people say, well, your computer can't handle 8K. Well, some computers can. And these Apple M1 MacBooks seem to be handling 8K all right. And plus, you can do proxies. There are ways that you can edit your 8K footage and export it. Now, even more than that, why do I think 8K is essential? Well, because the GH5 already does 4K pretty much as good as you can do it. They do 4K 10-bit 422. Most cameras can't do the internal 4K 10-bit 422. Only now are companies starting to implement this thing that's been in the GH5 since, what, 2017? Did it come out 2017, I think? So what I'm saying is this already has amazing 4K, and in fact, 4K 60p. You can do 60 frames per second on 4K, so you can slow that down. It's not 120, but it's not bad. So if it just has a small bump in 4K specs, like 4K 120 to go along with my regular GH5, I don't think that's enough of a reason for me to upgrade the camera. Also, I think if the GH6 only matches, let's say, the A7S III, that's the king right now, the A7S III, if the GH6 only matches the A7S III in specs, I think it's also going to lose, because the A7S III is a full-frame camera, and it also has amazing autofocus. So since we know Panasonic is not going to have that autofocus, then a lot of people would be willing to spend a little bit more money, because the GH6 is probably going to come in between $2,000 and $2,500. And while the A7S III is $3,500, which is certainly more expensive, what you get for that is probably worth it. The idea, if they have the same specs, that is, you know, because why would you not get that perfect autofocus and that full frame look? And, you know, I would do that. I would wait, save up a little bit more money, and get the A7S III if a GH6 simply has the A7S III specs. So the GH6 is going to have to do what the GH cameras always do, which is blow it out of the water. I am confident in Panasonic in this regard, because when the GH4 came out, it was doing 4K. Everyone was like, what is 4K? And then when the GH5 came out, they were doing the 10-bit 422 internally, and it had the waveforms and the vector scopes, and people were saying, really? You're going to give us all that in a $2,000 camera? Well, thank you very much. So I think Panasonic really does have to kind of up the game in terms of the specs, even in their own lineup. The Panasonic S5, which has just recently been released, that is $2,000 right now at B&H. $2,000 for a full-frame GH5, basically. So you can do 4K 10-bit 422, you can do 60p, you get that amazing shallow depth of field from that really fast glass, and there's actually a nice few Sigma lenses that are pretty affordable that you can put on the S5. So if you're looking, for instance, this is something else I'll mention, that I think the GH6 should only deal with video features. Just let the idea of the hybrid camera go. Sure, it's great that it can take good pictures when you need it to take good pictures, but don't focus on that, because if you're going to get a really good hybrid camera, even if you want to stay in the Panasonic system, you go with the S5. You'll get a full frame camera that has the GH5's capabilities. And this is what I mean about price. So if the GH5, when it was released, is $2,000, and the Panasonic S5, their full-frame GH5, is currently $2,000. If you release a GH6, which is more expensive than your S5, then it's going to have features that are better than the S5. Am I wrong? I am not wrong. You can't tell me I'm wrong. And that's why I think 8K is a no-brainer. Now, I didn't plan on getting on the 8K train this early. I had no real interest in it. But if Panasonic is going to give me 8K for, say, $2,500 and under, then, you know, all aboard. Choo-choo. Plus, I get to keep my lenses that I've been buying for a few years. Something else I should say about the 8K is that the first Panasonic camera I got was the G7. I got it in 2016, and it had 4K in it. And at the time in 2016, there were a whole lot of people, especially on YouTube, saying, you don't need 4K. Everyone only watches in 1080p. don't even worry about it. And now, of course, 4K is the norm. People are, even if they upload in 1080, they're often shooting in 4K and putting it on a 1080p timeline to get that crisper footage. And it's so nice for me that I am able to use, I still use the G7 for B-roll, for different shots, as my B-cam sometimes. And the fact is, it's nice to be able to still use that camera many years, 5 years later, I can still use the camera. So the 8K thing, and especially because we may not be getting past 8K in the future. As I mentioned earlier in this video, do you remember when I said that? We might not get past 8K. So who knows how long you might have this camera? It's actually made me think long and hard about what my next camera will be, because if it doesn't have 8K, I might not buy it. I know that sounds ridiculous. Like, I'd really planned to get this A7S III because everybody's really raving about it, but the fact is, it's a $3,500 camera in the US, which is very expensive here in Canada. The camera's like $5,000 here if you want to buy it. And that is a lot of money when I really enjoy the images I get out of my GH5 and my Sony A7S III. And this is some of the point I'm making, is that if I have stellar 4K in the A7S III, or A7S III, in the A7 III that you're looking at right now, and I have even better 4K in this beauty right here with its 10-bit glory, why do I need that incremental upgrade of 4K that the A7S III will get me? Okay, because I'm on this train of thought, if you get an 8K with an 8K 120 frames per second, then I think you're set. You're set for life. So maybe I'll just wait it out until I see a camera that gives me 8K and 8K 120. This is a bad way to look at it. Don't look at it this way, everybody. I'm just telling you what I know the GH6 needs to blow, some doors open. So that people will think about staying with Micro Four Thirds or even switching to Micro Four Thirds. If it has good enough specs, people might do that. Of course, it's not going to have the 8K 120. I'm not insane. I mean, the jury's out on that one, but I don't think I'm insane. So I think it also goes without saying that the GH6 is going to need to have some better dynamic range than GH5, better low light capabilities, and external raw output. I think that it will do all of those things, no problem. And I do think it's going to have the 8K, and I wish it would fix the autofocus. Let me tell you something. Panasonic, if you give me 8K and fix the autofocus, I will buy 100 of these cameras. I will build a house out of GH6s and I will live in it. That's how much I will love that camera. Please do that. You won't, but you should. So guys, you don't have to listen to me. I'm just some lunatic ranting and raving in front of this beautiful set that I just built this weekend. But I will tell you what I'm saying sounds to me like it makes a lot of sense. Now, if you're out there and you have a camera that is not working for you, by all means, go get the thing that you need. If that's a 4K camera that's 8-bit, a 4K that's 10-bit, fine. But what I'm saying is if you have a 4K camera that's working well for you, why get something else until they give you something that you don't have? So anyway, I'm excited about the announcement coming in the fall because Panasonic always push everybody to get better, and that's why I love them. Plus, their cameras are very easy to use. So if you like the video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again. Bye-bye.